in the hills of old Vermont. Oh, tonight I long to be where the catamount run free and the rattlesnake can lie out in the sun. Near the voices of the loons, the apple blossoms bloom way back in the hills of old Vermont. There used to be a barn near the old fishing pond way back in the hills of old Vermont. So many fields of hay now gone with yesterday way back in the hills of old Vermont. Oh, tonight I long to be where the catamount run free and the rattlesnake can lie out in the sun. Near the voices of the loons when the apple blossoms bloom way back in the hills of old Vermont. Yes, tonight I long to be where the catamount run free and the rattlesnake can lie out in the sun. Near the voices of the loons when the apple blossoms bloom way back in the hills of old Vermont. Well, I thought I'd start with that because that's where we are, folks. We're here in Vermont, and it's a beautiful day outside, and it's great to be able to share this time together and talk about this book and the journey of basically my life so far. Not everything, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what it is to chase a dream. I mean, what did you think, Beth, when you were reading the book?
Well, I enjoyed sort of hearing about your search for finding an instrument, and then sort of once you realized that you really liked the banjo, your determination to like not feed yourself so that you had the money saved up so that you could get your banjo. I always am interested in sort of like how creative people find their way to what they use to express their creativity. So that part of the story really interested me.
Well, with that story about the banjo, let's see, we've got a wall of instruments behind me right here. So this banjo here is that banjo that I saved my lunch money. You know, the thing is that I came from a long line of musical failures. And sometimes you have to experiment with different instruments until you find the instrument that really calls to you. So in the beginning, when I was a young kid, my mom, who was from Poland, she used to bring me to these polka camps, and the band would be playing, and there'd be a saxophone there, and I was always drawn to the idea of playing music. So I would hang out near the bandstand there and listen to the saxophone. So I wanted to play the saxophone, and I was very little at that time. And so when I talked to the school about playing a saxophone, they said that I was too small, that the instrument was too big. And they said, well, you can play the clarinet. Well, Beth, you can't play Wooly Bully on a clarinet. You can't tell a kid that, here's a clarinet, not a saxophone. So I wasn't disciplined enough to really practice. They gave me this Mel Bay book, and it just wasn't going well. And so that was my first musical failure. And then I had the situation where the kids in the neighborhood were all involved in a drum and bugle corps. And so I thought that would be cool. Maybe I'll learn how to play the drums, you know? But by the time that I got there, all the cool kids had the drums. And all they had left was an old baritone horn that when you opened up the case, it smelled like years of spit, And they didn't really give you much instruction on that thing. And I was trying to play, and I realized that it wasn't going that well. And so I found out years before Milli Vanilli that it was better to not play, but just hold your instrument in the parades, and nobody would complain about the notes that you didn't play. But I marched along and was in that band for a while, and we did a big show. Our big show was at the World's Fair, 1964 World's Fair, and they had us marching around the big sphere, and they had a little cover band in there in the New Jersey, pavilion, and the guy, was playing Wooly Bully and all kinds of the cool stuff that I wanted to play on the saxophone. So it was like, oh God, So I really felt like another musical failure. And then I was trying to play the guitar. My cousin played the guitar, and I was trying to play it, but I didn't have any instructions, so that went nowhere. And then I was carrying around equipment for a rock and roll band, one of those high school bands. And so I was the roadie. You got paid in hamburgers, and while I was doing that, they were playing Beatles and The Who, and they were very good. The name of the group's Exit, and they're still together, sort of. They kind of reunited now, and so I felt like there was something else that was calling me, and I started hearing the sound of a banjo. It was like in my head. I can't really explain why. But I was hearing this banjo. I can remember going, walking around, and in my head was the sound of a banjo. And, between, the Beverly Hillbillies sound and there was a song that was played. It was on the radio. It was called Greenwich Village, and it was by the Village Stompers. And da dun dun da 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 dun dun da da da, and I kept hearing that sound, that banjo, and so I told my mother that I wanted to play the banjo, and she reminded me of all my musical failures, and she said, "Oh well."
Very encouraging.
Yes. She said, "No." She said, well, if you're going to take, you have to take some lessons, And so I went to the music store, and I said, do you have any banjos? And they said, oh, we've got lots of banjos. We have 5-string banjos, 4-string banjos. We've even got a 12-string banjo. And being like 15, I would thought like maybe the 12-string banjo would be the coolest thing. But they said, oh,
more quality.
but we have a 4-string. And they gave me this 4-string banjo to rent with a Mel Bay book, similar to the thing that I had hated with the clarinet. And the guy didn't play banjo. He played a Les Paul electric guitar. So this was not going well. And then I stumbled on the band manager, Mike Roba, told me about Pete Seeger. Said that there was this guy, Pete Seeger, who was on Sesame Street, and maybe you're talking about the band. You should see if you can see him. And so I turned on Sesame Street, and there he was. He was playing the big banjo with a long neck like this one here. And I went back to that banjo teacher, and I said, the guy, I saw this guy on TV, and he had a banjo, and it had 5 strings in it. And he said, you learn how to play that 4-string, and we'll just drill a hole and stick a peg in. He didn't know anything about playing the banjo. So I quit. And then my mother thought that I had given up on this idea. And I got myself a Pete Seeger instruction book, and I didn't have a banjo, but I pretended I had a banjo. And I would practice on my pillow and the hand motions, or when I was in school on the tabletop, on the desk, anything that I could. And I would go into a music store and ask if I could play the banjo so I could practice what I was doing. Reluctantly, they would hand me the banjo because they knew that I didn't have any money to buy it. And I decided I really wanted a banjo. And I told my mother, and of course, at this point, she said, absolutely not. no banjo. Well, that didn't stop me. That's where I decided, like, where does a kid get money? Lunch money. That's right. So I had a hunger strike. I stopped eating and I was saving all of my lunch money up for this banjo and any chore money, birthday money. I was collecting all the money I could. And I saw that there was a ad in the paper from a wholesaler. I didn't even know what a wholesaler was, but I saw that he had a banjo. So I called him up and he had this banjo and I was only $50 short. And I told my mother I had stopped eating. And, and so she said, okay, Rik, I'll give you the 50 bucks. And this is the banjo that I still have today. It looks a lot different than when I first got it, but it's an old Gibson Mastertone, a long neck banjo. And it's been beside me since the time I was 15.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, that's a
So,
long relationship with an instrument.
yeah, and it's like it really has been everywhere, that I've been all over the world has traveled with me. I don't take it overseas as much anymore just because one time I was in Australia playing over there and they lost it on the way home. And you can imagine what it's like, to realize that your instrument is gone. Everything, all my clothes came back, but all the instruments that I had from that trip, they were all missing.
Oh my God.
And they were missing for days, for a long, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to get my banjo back. And luckily, about 3 or 4 days later, they came and they delivered my banjo back. And ever since then, I said, well, I have to get a touring banjo because I'm not taking this one and putting it in the airlines again.
Yeah, you can't trust the airlines. Well, no,
Yeah.
like I was married to a musician in a previous life, and the bass that he had learned to play on was stolen, like from my car in the night, and the entire next day, he and his bandmates were in mourning, like
Yeah.
because it's a big deal. You have a serious relationship with your instrument, and especially if it's been all around the world with you. It's like to have that all of a sudden disappear is the worst.
Now you were talking a little bit about this idea about learning the how to to really learn the instrument. And my philosophy, even as a young kid, was and especially you got to remember that with a banjo, it's not the banjo kind of works with movie soundtracks. So like back when when Bonnie and Clyde came out, Beverly Hill, the Foggy Mountain Breakdown, that became popular, and the banjo was very popular. And then the popularity waned, and then when I got interested in the instrument was before Deliverance, which was the next big banjo boom. So there weren't many books at that time, and it was hard to learn how to play the banjo. So you had to, this is way before the internet. So you
Right.
had to go and you had to find people who you could learn from. And I was a teenager, and I had my banjo, and I had heard about this place called Albert's Cabin out in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, Albert's Cabin. And I have a story that I'm going to share with you from my book to give you a little idea what it was like trying to learn how to play the banjo back then. Uh, as a young banjo picker, I sometimes had to go to great lengths to learn new tunes. Back in the early 1970s, there were few banjo books and definitely no internet. So you had to learn the old-fashioned way and go out and find someone to teach you. I had often heard of a place called Albert's Cabin in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. Not known by your average tourist, the Pine Barrens is a kind of remote, exotic wonderland down in South Jersey, where the land changes from the rich soil that earns the state of its nickname, the Garden State, to a sandy land of pine trees, creeks, and swamps. A lot of the land is still untamed and left in a wild state. The people who inhabit the region are known as Pineys, and are just as unique as the land itself. It's from this very region that the stories of the Jersey Devil sprang up, where a woman known as Mrs. Leeds was said to have given birth to her 13th child, who turned into a creature with a goat's head, bat wings, and a forked tail, and flew away. Some still say that you can hear the lost child of Mrs. Leeds screeching through the midnight air. Albert's cabin was said to be owned by two brothers who used it as a hunting lodge. It was turned into a mecca for all who love the sound of the fiddle and the banjo. It was where the Pineys would gather every Saturday night to play some of the best hillbilly music this side of heaven. I was still in high school. At the time, I didn't have a car or any money. I somehow convinced my pal, Dwayne, that we could hitchhike down to South Jersey and find this unusual place. I grabbed my banjo and Dwayne his mandolin. Dwayne really didn't play the mandolin, but I convinced him that he could. We strapped our sleeping bags onto our backs and started off down the highway. We got as far as Mount Holly, where we found a tiny music store. They had really some nice banjos and guitars there, and I asked the owner if he had ever heard of Albert's cabin. The tall, middle-aged owner replied that he went there often, and in fact, he was heading over there tonight. If we'd like to come, he'd be happy to take us along. Nowadays, this would be exactly the kind of harebrained excursion parents would warn their teenagers against. At the time, I thought I was on an adventure, following some kind of a mystic road to find the kind of music I was looking for. We piled into his station wagon and rode down the town called Waretown, where at a junction we took off down a series of darkly lit back roads. I looked at Dwayne, and we both started getting the creeps. Then the driver drove the wrong way down the parkway and turned into a dirt road between a row of bushes. Now our worst fears were racing through our young minds. After all, who was this man? We had just met him and didn't know a thing about him. He kept swerving around and through the pine trees past abandoned TV sets, washer machines, and a stack of old tires. As we passed a tall tree, we saw an old bullet-written sign poking through its branches. Both gasped as we were convinced this man was some kind of an axe murderer, and he was taking us far away to kill us. Just about the time we were ready to scream, we heard something. It was the friendly sound of people playing music. At once our fears ended. As the car pulled into the grassy parking lot, our driver smiled and said, "Well, boys, we're here." Soon our new friend was introducing us all around as we pulled out our instruments and joined right in with a crowd of pickers standing around the porch. As I looked around, I saw two other banjo players. One was a youngster, like me, and the other a real old-timer who played what looked like some kind of a homemade banjo. I picked out the tune Cripple Creek and noticed the old man was smiling as he watched my fingers beat over the head of my banjo. I need to explain that in the early 1970s, banjo music was rare. Even if you did hear it, it would be more likely be bluegrass than old-time folk music. But this scene for me was the real thing. The old fellow introduced himself. "My name's Sam Hunt. I've been playing this banjo for over 40 years. Yep, I even make 'em myself. Cut the wood from my own wood shop. This one here I made a while back. You know, I got letters from all over the world saying that they want one of my banjos. Yep, I even make 'em too. I make one of the last of the Barnegat snake box boat builders. You ever heard of 'em? Well, we used 'em around here for duck hunting. Not many people do anymore, but I like to make 'em. Even cut the wood from my own trees." Well, old Sam went on like that without hardly taking a breath of air in between sentences. I never heard anyone talk so fast and furious in my whole life. I like Sam. There was something almost primeval about this old fellow. He was off the true vine. Even though I was a rank beginner, I could frail the banjo, an early African style that involves striking the strings with your right hand rather than using picks like in a Dixieland jazz players did, or finger picking like the bluegrass banjo players. When I started frailing, a crowd drew and gathered, and before long, both Dwayne and I were the hit of the evening. As we shifted from one song to the next, a tune caught my ear. It was like nothing I had ever heard before. "Hey, what's that tune called?" I asked. "Well, that's the old Joe Clark," Sam shouted back. "Ain't you never heard of that one?" Uh, no, was my reply. "Well, Sam said, why don't we just learn it right now?" Soon Sam and the young banjo player named Max were showing me how to find the notes. "It's easy," said Sam. "Most of the song just plays itself. Why, you just tune to open G and slide right into these notes." That whole night, I kept working on that one song. The party was just about over, and I was sliding my finger down the first string and singing softly, "Fare thee well, old Joe Clark, fare thee well, I say. I travel around 1,000 miles to hear your banjo play." And Beth, it sounds something like this. I wish I had a nickel, wish I had a dime, I wish I had a pretty girl, I kiss her all the time. Fare thee well, old Joe Clark, fare thee well, I say. I travel around 1,000 miles, hear that music play. Fare thee well, old Joe Clark, fare thee well, I say. I travel around 1,000 miles, hear that music play. Well, that gives you a little idea about, how you learn these tunes, and especially in those old days, you had to meet up with different musicians and learn right from them. And I think that by learning in that way, you learn more than just the music. You learn about the whole kind of lifestyle of this music, because unlike a lot of music, this folk music is a lifestyle. It's something that people who love to play the banjo or sing sea shanties or anything with the old style music, that they kind of integrate it into their life, and it becomes sort of like a focal point where they base their life around it. Their friends kind of play this kind of music, and the way that they live their whole lives is based around the things that the music has taught us.
I was thinking about how in the beginning of the book, obviously, you're sort of seeking out people that can teach you things so that you learn more about music. But I wonder if there was a moment when you started to feel like you were the expert ready to give your knowledge to others.
I wouldn't call it being an expert.
Shouldn't have word.
I think that it's more like you realize that you know some things that you can share with others. And so I think that you get to that point where, and one of the things like at the Song Farmers group that we have at the library is that my role there is not necessarily as a musician, but as a teacher and facilitator to help to get other people to play. So I try to, if I can see somebody's having a problem with something, I can give a little bit of advice on how to do that better. But that's because I came, I learned from a whole bunch of great mentors, and they came into my life in such a big way.
Well, I was thinking about the part in the book where where Pete Seeger is like, you should do a festival in New Jersey. And so you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do a festival in New Jersey. Like, that's a big leap of faith.
You
And then
don't
you
say
pulled it
no
up,
to
right?
Beth, you don't say no to Pete Seeger.
I know, exactly.
You know, Pete calls you up and tells you, gives you your marching orders. Well, Rick, you know, over in Perth Amboy, they got a nice harbor. It would make a good festival. Go down and see if you can organize it. You know, I mean, this is long after I had met Pete, and I really, yeah, I was not qualified to do it at all. And I can remember walking into the Mayor Outlowski, the mayor of Perth Amboy. My hair was pretty long back then, you know, and I had this beat up jean jacket on, and he looked at me and he said, "No one comes in here without a tie." And I said, "Mayor, you know, if I had a tie, I probably would wear it for you, but I don't have one. But this is important." And I started telling him about this whole idea of a folk festival right there in the harbor. Now, at this point, the harbor was really run down. It wasn't what it is today. It's changed a lot. And the festival that we created was part of that change. So I went in there and I told him that we could do something to create more energy, good energy around that harbor. And he said that he was willing to help. And he let me work with his recreation department head, Mr. Bandola. And together, you know, he was an older guy, and he just kind of took me under his wing, you know, and said, "This is what we got to do. And we can get you know, we have to have the fire department just in case. We have to notify the police department. We'll get the stage." And before you know it, that first time we had Harry Chapin came, and Harry and the Clearwater, the big sloop Clearwater, which was the reason that Pete was asking about this, you know, this festival, because, you know, we were at that time, you know, this was, I think, 1975, something like 74, 75. And, you know, I had gotten involved with Pete Seeger and the Clearwater organization about this replica of the old-fashioned sailing sloop that used to sail on the Hudson River. And it was being used as sort of an environmental symbol to get people to think about cleaning up the river. And so everything that we were doing was in support of Clearwater. And Clearwater is still going on today, folks. So if you want to get involved with the sloop Clearwater, you can go to clearwater.org and get more information. So that this beautiful boat, you know, came to Perth Amboy. We had Harry Chapin was there, all the local musicians, and we had Bob McGrath from Sesame Street was there. And it was just a wonderful thing. We had about 1,000 people came to that. So it lived up to what I said that we could do. And then the next festival, Pete came. And that year we had over 5,000 people. And that's what I'm saying is when we got that many people down there, everything changed as far as people started looking at, hey, this is a really nice, you know, harbor area. And eventually what happened was it was in the legislature about whether or not they were going to put money into the waterfront to clean up the waterfront. And somebody said, I went down there one time and there was this festival. And there were all these people, and there was a craft show, and there was, you know, I think we should give them money. And so, you know, you don't know where these things are going to go and how things are going to change. But that actually happened, so that change came about because we put that good energy into that area.
Positive vibes. I was trying to think what my other question was. Do you have something that you want to talk about?
Well, you know, I think the the idea of how my life started out, because my mom was from Poland, my father was Polish and Italian, and so I grew up in that environment, with two Polish grandmothers, always talking Polish, making kibasi and pierogi and gołąbki, and raised in that kind of environment. But because my dad was working nights at a factory, and my mom was working in the daytime, I was one of those latchkey kids, and I didn't have my sister didn't come along until I was 11. So I was alone most of my growing up years. And that was there was like I was a daydreamer. I would kind of fantasize about a lot of things. In fact, I didn't know this until recently, but my mom told me not too long ago that when I was really little, I had an imaginary friend, and he was the professor. And the professor would travel with me, and we would go all to many different countries, and we'd have all kinds of adventures together. And my mom and dad thought I was a little bit off.
You were actually like visualizing your future.
Well, that's what she said. At the end, she said, Rick, it turns out that you actually became like the professor of traveling to all these different places all over the world. And so what was important about that, Beth, was the realization that the seeds of creativity were in me from a child, from an early child, and it took the music to bring it out and to really blossom. But I like most kids, growing up in New Jersey and stuff, you can sometimes run into some bad characters, and if it wasn't for the music and the way that my life shifted, it could have been totally different, totally different. But having that mentor and having Pete Seeger, because after I read Pete's book when I was 15. And I really, really got into this guy. I really learned everything about him, and he was really he is sort of like a father figure. But I never really expected him to come into my life, And I've told this story many times, but since there's some people here who haven't heard it, I'm old. I'm allowed to tell stories more than once. What happened was, I was learning all this music from the book, and reading things. I was going to these Pete Seeger concerts. I went to the first one when I was a young kid, still in high school. I skipped school that day, and he was playing over in Douglas College. And I went. My hair was really long, so I was able to sneak into the college, and nobody bothered me. And I saw Pete standing on the stage. He was playing that banjo and the 12-string guitar. And it was almost like, sometimes you have this moment of clarity. And that's what happened. I was looking at him, and I felt like my whole body was kind of filling up with light. And I felt like I had a purpose for the first time in my life. I felt like this is what I want to do with my life. And after that little concert, I went backstage, and he was having a petition against the Vietnam War. And everybody was there and signing the petition. And I walked over to him and meekly said, I didn't know what to say. So I said, hey, Pete, why do you play the banjo? And he looked at me and smiled. He goes, because I like the tone. Well, that meant the world to me, just that, he would actually talk to me. And so that was sort of like the beginning where all of a sudden things started changing. And in my book, I talk a lot about this, about the law of attraction. And he came more and more into my life until he was at a concert over at Central Park playing with Arlo Guthrie. And my mother took my sister Lisa and Tina, and they all went down together to go look at some museums. And they saw everybody setting up all the blankets and things over in the park. and they were asking, what was going on, and they heard that Pete Seeger and Arlo Guthrie was going to be there, and they're setting up their blankets. Well, my sister Lisa, uh, she knew that I had all these Pete Seeger records and books and stuff. She kind of thought that we were close, that we actually knew each other, which we didn't. But she decided that she would ask the guard if she could go back to meet with Pete Seeger because her brother Rick is there, and she and Tina got backstage somehow and met with Pete and Toshi, and there was something that happened there that still to this day I don't know because I wasn't there. But at the concert later that night, it was a great concert. Pete said, "Well, tomorrow we're having a Clearwater show over in Hoboken, New Jersey. Everybody's invited." And I was all excited. I said, "I'm definitely going to that. And so I'm getting up in the morning and take my banjo, put it on my back. I'm going out the door. And my sister Lisa looks at me and she says, "Did you know that Pete Seeger files his nails?" I was like, "What?" I didn't pay any attention, walked out the door. And I got to Hoboken, and there were a few young musicians set up. And I went over and I was playing with them, just playing along. And Pete comes over, and he takes out his 12-string guitar, and he starts strumming along, and he's smiling. Well, I didn't expect anything like this. I was like, oh, okay, I'm playing this with Pete himself. And the music stops, and Pete, he looks at me, he said, "Who are you? I haven't seen you before." And I stumble out, I'm Rik Palieri. And he said, "Rick, I met your sisters yesterday." I was like shocked. "You what?" He said, "I met your sisters yesterday. They told me you were a good banjo player. Why don't you come and join us and we'll sing a couple of songs up on stage?" And that's what happened. Brought me up on stage. I joined the other singers from the Clearwater, and Pete and I played Old Joe Clark together and Cripple Creek and a few other things. And then he started calling me up, and that's when he started asking me to get involved and put together the Festival of Blueberries, we called it in New Jersey. And then from that point, we kind of would send. I've had a big pen pal relationship with Pete. He would always be sending me letters. I still have about 64 of Pete's letters here. And he would always be, telling me about different things that I should do and guiding me along. And sometimes he would call me up and we would talk on the telephone. Back when it cost a fortune to talk on the phone. If I called and Pete went on and on and on, his wife Toshi would say, "Peter, who's paying for that call?" But once again, you didn't say no to Pete, so it was really wonderful. And as our lives continued and I got involved in more things, Pete was always there to guide me along. So that's sort of like that mentorship of like sometimes, a mentor will step into your life and absolutely change the direction that you're going. So any questions?
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe we open it up to questions from other folks that are with us since it's like 2:40 now.
Time is going by.
Yeah.
Anybody have any
Anybody
questions?
have any questions?
Don't be shy. I don't know. Well, I think maybe what I should do is I have some other stories
Okay.
because we're talking about the road,
Yeah.
right? And I spent this book, Banjo Man. We should talk a little bit about it. I had written an earlier book called The Road Is My Mistress. And there were a lot of stories. Some of them are in this book, but it didn't tell the full story. There was always something missing in that, and I really felt that it was important that I was able to kind of complete that circle, that story circle. And it took me a long time, because I have to confess to all you folks, because a lot of people, when they think about writers, they think about somebody who's like, they just love to write. That's what they want to do. I don't love to write. It's I have to write, you know? It's like for me to write is hard. It's very, very time consuming and also I just, I because when I was a young kid, I wasn't a great student and all that stuff catches up with you later on. And so when I sit down to write, it's not an easy thing. But I have to write, and that's why this book is what we're saying, 530 pages. So for somebody who doesn't like to write, I sure have a lot to say. And a lot of it is because of the experiences that are out on the road. And I spent many years living on the road. And that's what's really, Beth, is really difficult at these times, in this pandemic when we can't travel. We can't go on the road. This is the longest that I've been home in a long time.
How are you
Uh,
handling that?
Mariana's
Do
doing
you feel
great
that?
with it,
Do you look at
you
your
know.
car and go,
Yeah, I mean, usually I would travel for months at a time. And back when I wrote this little thing I'm going to read, I w- I was doing these school programs across the country for the National School Assembly program. And so I'd leave it's in September, go out and I'd come back in December and I'd be here for 2 weeks and then I'd go back out on the road until the end of May. And I lived in my VW van with my dog Koza, my Polish sheepdog, and we traveled to every state in the lower 48. And we were living in the van. I mean, I tried in the beginning to do this hotel. I hated the hotel thing. I felt much closer to the people by being, in the van and sleeping at truck stops and different roadside kind of things. But it was lonely. It was a lonely life out there. And this is a little thing that I wrote down. It's from my journal. Uh, and it was I was traveling out to Idaho when I wrote this. It's tough here being out on the road, living in the hundreds of towns every week, not knowing a friendly soul to laugh with or cry with. Nighttime is worst of all, as you feel truly alone. Passing through the small towns, you see that some of the houses have their living rooms or bedroom drapes pulled wide open. Riding by, you can get a peek into the lives of the people inside. Lit by a naked light bulb or the television, you can see furniture and sometimes a few pictures on the wall. You hardly ever see the people, for they are hidden behind glass and wood, and their bodies are just mere shadows dancing on the wall. It's long after midnight. All the lights are out, and you, the voyeur, are bathed in the blackness and loneliness of the night highway. In the towns, everyone has gone to bed. Children sleep restfully after that last loving goodnight kiss on their forehead, while their parents rock in each other's arms till they too fall gently asleep. For you, the traveler, there is no kiss, no fond embrace, only the humming of the vibrating engine and the sound of the wind whipping across your windshield as you travel down an endless road. So that was, when people have the romance of the road, they don't know how lonely it is and what it's like to be out there like one step from being homeless. Because if your vehicle breaks down in the middle of nowhere, you, I mean, you are homeless. And I often thought about that as I'd be traveling by, and what Koza would be riding with me, and we'd be sleeping sometimes in a park, or different campgrounds, and And then, luckily we never had any problems, you know. One time a police officer came, it was somewhere in Kentucky. It was a really lonely back road where we had pulled off. The cops came over and they're talking to me and they said, the people here are wicked mean. You got to be careful. And then Koza woke up and this big head poked up and he said, well, I think you're going to be okay. And they left, you know. But it was a lot of really interesting moments there out on the road. And I kept meeting all these different characters as I traveled, you know. And what this book and the way that Tim Brooks, a wonderful writer and friend of mine from way back, we've been friends for many, many years. When I was putting the book together, he wanted to help me, and we wanted to make it so yes, it's my story, but really it's our story. It's for all of the people out there who live this kind of life. All of those musicians who are like fireflies in the night, you know, traveling down that road. And that's the whole thing is that's a celebration for all those communities, those little folk communities scattered out all over the world that I've been involved with. And one of those is the hobo community. Now, that I wanted to kind of share this song because it's a kind of an important song in so many ways. Another one of my great mentors is Utah Phillips. This week, I have to say that if you look on Facebook, you're going to see a lot of things. There's a new film called The Long Memory about Utah's life, which I haven't watched yet, but I'm really excited about watching it. So it was Utah who really wanted me to get involved with the hobo community. And he was saying that, it would help me to write songs that I couldn't write. Not every song that you write has to be, from you. You can tell other people's story. And maybe that's important, not just for you, but for them. Because they can't tell that story the way that you can. And so you can take them into your life and carry them with you, which any songwriter knows that whenever you sing a song about people, it's like they're there with you up on stage. You're telling about their life. So I went to the hobo convention, the National Hobo Convention. It was one of the oldest conventions in the United States where all the hobos gather together. And we sit there for a couple of weeks and tell stories and share songs. And a lot of them are hobo royalties, the kings and queens of hobos. And they all have monikers or nicknames. And one of my favorites was a hobo king named Frog. Now, Frog got his moniker the way he used to leap onto a moving boxcar. And his friends are worried about him. And I'm going to just read this little bit of the story here. This is right after a hobo gathering that I was at in Pennsburg, Pennsylvania. Not long after we'd seen Frog in Pennsburg, he had to go back into the hospital. He was having some serious health issues, and his hobo pals were worried that he would catch the westbound or catch that little black train ride up to heaven. I was on my way to England to do a tour when I received an email from my hobo pals. Yes, even all the hobos are online these days. In the email, they had sad news that Frog had indeed caught the westbound. I was thinking of my old friend and composed a little song about his life. To my surprise, I received another email a few days later. This one said they had a big party for Frog in St. Paul, Minnesota, and all the hobos were there in honor of their dear fallen comrade. Just as the party was in full swing, they got a surprising telephone call. It was none other than Frog. "But Frog," his astonished friends exclaimed, "we thought you were dead." "Dead?" Frog replied. No, I ain't dead. I was robbed. Robbed? His friend said. What do you mean you were robbed? Well, he said, I was walking down the street, when a guy came and lifted my wallet and stole my identification. Then he started to pretend that he was me, till he went out to a bus to North Dakota and died. When the policemen found him, they thought it was me too. And they started calling everybody up and telling them that I'm dead. Then he went on, I called to tell you that I ain't dead. But now the good thing is I know exactly what my funeral's going to be like. After that, I wrote this song for Frog. And it goes like this. I live my life as a hobo. My only home is a soul train. I've been a frog and a king. Lord, I've done everything. Now I'm riding on that westbound train. Let the jungle fires burn wild and free, and pass my bottle around. Let the train whistle blow, tell the old boat I'm riding on the westbound. I slept in every old boxcar. I rode down every railroad line. Now I don't have to boast, I rode coast to coast. Now I'm riding on that old westbound. Let the jungle fires burn wild and free, and pass my bottle around. Let the train whistle blow, tell the old beaux I'm a riding on the westbound. Light a candle at the back of my boxcar and gather my good friends around. Let the old banjo ring while the hobos all sing. I'm riding on the westbound. Let the jungle fires burn wild and free, and pass my bottle around. Let the train whistle blow, tell the old beaux I'm riding on the westbound. Lay me down on a blanket of cardboard. Use my bindle to pillow my head. And when my body's gone, my spirit will ride on, riding on that old westbound. Let the jungle fires burn wild and free, and pass my bottle around. Let the train whistle blow, tell the old beaux I'm a riding on the westbound. Now, just in December, this was a few years ago, I wrote the song. And it was Frog's favorite song. He loved the song. He said, Rick, nobody could tell of my demise and resurrection like you could. Well, in December, he did pass away. And one of his last wishes was that I came to Britt, Iowa, and sang that song at his graveside as they put his ashes in the ground. Well, I went with a friend of mine, Rick Nestler, who went out to Britt, Iowa, and we're there in the cemetery, and they had Frog's ashes. And then I noticed they had a tombstone, and on the tombstone was the first verse of my song on Frog's tombstone. That's how much it meant to him to have this song written about him. And that's what I'm saying, folks, is that sometimes as a songwriter, you don't have to tell your story. It's just as important to celebrate other people in the songs that you write. Any questions? Yes? No? Everybody's quiet. I don't know. Is Beth there?
No questions, but I love your stories.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and folks, the way that I'm selling this book is I'm not on Amazon, and I might do that later on, but right now I'm just having people write to me. I have on my website, it's Rik Palieri, RikPalieri.com, and it says for the book, and people, just use your PayPal, and then I autograph each one, and we make up a special little package with a note card, and my wife here, Mariana, makes these really kind of cool bookmarks, because like this one here. So we put a bookmark in each one, and this way it's sort of like from me to you, in the old-fashioned way. It's not like you're buying it from off a shop shelf, that you're getting it from the person who wrote the book. And so we've been, every day a couple more books go out, and it's been working well, and I'm really happy. And I've had so much support from my friends and my family in making this all come to life. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, Rik, but it's sure been fascinating to hear you ramble for a while. Thank you.
All right, Dan. That's great, Daniel. Oh, cool. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you on my TV show. And that's the whole thing, is with this community that we're talking about. This is about all of us. That's what I wanted to make sure, that this kind of book was not just about me, but it was about us. And right now it's so hard for all of us because we want to be together. We want to get together. We want to be out on the road. We have our road family that we miss so much. And mine is all over the world, as yours is too. You've been over in Germany and different places. Have you been in Australia yet?
Yes, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, and the Netherlands, and Canada and Mexico. But other than that, I haven't gotten around much.
Oh, not much. Yeah, I think most of us, who are road warriors, this has been a very difficult time, especially because we don't know when it's going to end.
That's right. Ellen was just saying the other day, I learned years ago I can tolerate pretty much anything if I have an end point.
Yeah.
But this time we don't have an end point.
Yeah. No, it's true. We really don't know, and it's hard to make plans for something that you don't know when you can actually do it.
Right.
And so, like, every gig that I had got canceled, all the tours and everything. And so that's why I've kind of been using the live stream as a way to continue my creativity. And the book just kind of, like, a lot of people are saying, oh man, it's a terrible time to put out a book in a pandemic. But for me, it's given me a lot to really do.
And it gives us something to read too.
Yeah.
Right. People have more reading time than usual, Rik, so it's actually not a terrible time to put out.
Yeah, a lot of people are reading, and
Definitely.
so anybody else have any questions? I know that there are people out there. Yes? No? Well, what do you think? Should we go on a little bit more, or what do you want to do, Beth?
I think you should play another song, and then maybe someone will be inspired to ask another question. If not, then it's such a beautiful day. I don't know.
Yeah,
We all go outside.
Well, I see that we're recording this, so this way more people will be able to
Right,
tune in,
exactly.
and so the fun thing is you have lots of guitars around. Daniel, you know what I'm talking about. There's a good reason, when you're at home doing the live streams, yeah, Daniel's pulling out his guitar right there. I mean, the way that we can do this is that we musicians, when we see each other play, we just mute and play along. Well, this is a song that I wrote for Mariana's mom. Those of you who don't know, Mariana's mother was a very important person here in Vermont as a peace activist. She spent her whole life working for peace. And there's a lot of that story, which is very complicated, that is in my book, as far as her family being Hitler resistors and so much more. So when she was turning 80, we had a celebration here at the house. And she had her two daughters, Mariana and Heidi. She has more kids than that, but those are the ones that were here. They all went out to a tree nursery, and they brought home a linden tree. And then we dug a big hole in our yard, and we planted that tree as a family. Then she had a party and invited all of her friends. Everybody came by, and she said, "Well, my friends and family are here. I want to declare my wishes. When my time comes, I want you to take this tired old body and I want you to cremate it. Then take the ashes and scatter them right here on this linden tree that we just planted. And then every time you look outside and you see that old tree growing, you'll think of me. And in a way, I'll be able to keep growing with you." So I wrote this song for Crystal. When it's time to leave this earth, give my ashes to the dirt. Dig a hole on a mountainside and plant a tree with me inside. Plant a tree, plant a tree, plant a tree, and think of me. I'll be standing by your side. Plant a tree, I'll never die. Shower me with sun and rain till my roots start to grow again. You won't miss me when I'm gone, no, I'll be with you all year long. I'll be there in the winter, I'll be there in the spring, from the first snowfall till the robins sing, through the hazy days of summer till the last leaf falls. I'll keep on growing true and tall. Plant a tree, plant a tree, plant a tree, and think of me. I'll be standing by your side. Plant a tree, I'll never die. When your children sing and play, let them through my branches sway. Jump and roll in autumn's leaves, carve their names for all to see. Plant a tree, plant a tree, plant a tree, and think of me. I'll be standing by your side. Plant a tree, I'll never die. Years will come and the years will go till I'm so old I cannot grow. Then chop me up for wood to burn, but save a seed so I may return. Plant a tree, plant a tree, plant a tree, and think of me. I'll be standing by your side, and we'll keep reaching for the sky.
I don't know what else can be said then.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm glad that everybody took some time today to join us in this little talk, and thanks to the Carpenter-Carse Library in Heinsberg, Vermont, for putting on this event, and you, Beth, as the director, for doing this interview. And does anybody have anything to say? Wendy, you have anything to say?
No, it's always, I know we're old friends with Rik and Mariana, and I get to hear these stories a lot, and I never get bored. So it's always a pleasure, Rik. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for taking time out of your busy day to tune in.
Thanks so much, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Rick.
All right.
See you tomorrow night.